Listen.
Not only is it an underdog story, it's more like a no-dog story. Like, he's literally a guy on a couch playing video games. It's not like he was even racing little cars in Little League.
So Gran Turismo, based on a true story, is based on a true story about a guy who went from playing with his joystick to gear shifting on a real-life racetrack. And I was surprised by the concept, because it's not your standard video game movie where you're in the game, but a movie where they play the video game in the movie. And because GT is so realistic with its cars, a literal gamer ended up becoming a professional driver. That's like a Guitar Hero player headlining Coachella. Now, Sony's realized that they can't keep all their money on Spidey, so they really have been growing their video game movie adaptations and their shows, and they've kind of shifted the curse that we've known for a while, and it looks like it's just going to be the beginning because they have a lot of the works. Overall, I thought this one was pretty decent because they pretty much make it a sports movie. They really had the drivers going 170 on the tracks, they filmed with real pit crews, had more rear shots than the hub, and the movie damn near has the special credits included in the runtime because they show you how they scan the cars and get the movements, and especially with the sound, because this is one of the very few movies that's coming out in 12-track IMAX audio, and that is the best thing out there right now. So besides the box office scam that they pulled, where they were counting all the pre-screenings to beat Barbie, I'd still say it's a junior price for me, since the action scenes were really cool. It has that traditional come-up story, and it is inspirational enough that I almost looked past a major thing they switched out from the real-life story. Let me explain.
Jan, I'm so intrigued. If you had to estimate to like the nearest, I want to say 100 hours, how much time do you think you've logged on the Gran Turismo game?
Say 2 hours a night for 11 years, whatever the math is on that.
So the story begins with Orlando Bloom's character, who was a marketing executive who came up with the idea of the academy to begin with, and he actually went to Nissan with it, or as Bloom calls it,
welcome to Team Nissan.
He pitches an idea so crazy that it would only be possible in a movie. Based on a true story, because Nissan actually agreed to this in 2008. One of the big ways that he sells it is that everyone nowadays is just getting an Uber, so no one really cares about their own cars or even owning a car, and for a car company that's kind of a big deal. It also reminds me a lot of the complaints that the Fast and Furious franchise has been getting, because at first that was all about customizing and working on your cars, which not only creates an attachment to the vehicle, but it bonds a lot of people and families, kids, because they're working on them. And I never realized that in GT, they make you build that car from scratch before you get the Need for Speed.
Your kids are scrawny little gamer kids.
That's where you come in.
After getting approved for this crazy idea, Orlando then goes looking for a trainer that'll be dumb enough to take these kids from playing a simulator to actually going full speed in a car. That's where we see David Harbour's Jack Salter, who's like the only trainer desperate enough to take it, but that's only because his current situation is dealing with a kid who's disrespecting him more than 11.
I've always loved Hoosiers since I was a kid. Hoosiers. You know, I grew up with Gene Hackman and Hoosiers.
I've heard him talk about Hoosiers for so long, like when we were shooting the film, and I always think, God, I gotta watch this film.
I would love to make my version of that Gene Hackman Hoosiers movie that you get that feeling from. Archie, I'm gonna make a TikTok version of it for you though.
That leads us to our main guy, Jan Martinborough, who's marked the record for the fastest UK player, giving him an invite to compete in the PlayStation race in order to join the GT Academy.
I passed my test a week before I got to set. I had to pass in 2 weeks. I was shooting another film at the time. I was taking my lessons at night. All very intense.
I have to say though, getting the racing parts is one thing, you know, for all the gearheads, but Archie having to get the gameplay down to not tick off the gamers, that's talent. Like, they take it so seriously, the real life Jans actually made his steering wheel rig that you see in the movie in his own shop class. That said, all these hours that this guy put in, and yet no game in real life. Easily the most skippable parts of the movie would be all the romance bits, since they don't really do much with it. Like, the farthest it goes is a moment where he corrects her, and this man really says, actually, it's not a game, it's a simulator. Boy, it's gonna be a no if you keep talking like that. If anything, I wish they gave all of those scenes over to the family, because they really played well off of each other. There's his mama, who's played by a Spice Girl, who I didn't realize is married to an actual racer, but it's the scenes with his dad, played by Jimon, who, he just did a fantastic job. His father isn't really happy with what he's doing because he's always had a career in soccer, and he wants Jans to follow just like his brother is, but instead, Pops considers what he does a gimmick with all the video games.
And that dynamic plays out in the movie. It's a bit more exaggerated, really, with the father, because he was on board in reality a bit quicker.
Oh. Scratch that. The first time we see him drive is actually in a getaway chase from a copper after a party, meaning that this dude isn't just good at GT, but GTA. That leads him to getting in trouble with his dad, who puts him to work at the yards. just for this kid to dip like an hour into his first shift? Really, it's just a setup to get a real tense pre-race on his bike in order for him to get to the PlayStation race that he needs to be at. They're just filling it out for some tension. It's all pretty goofy, but they do it in the most genuine way possible. Like, they'll be doing these CGI bits where he's in his room and then he imagines he's in the car, and then other times he'll be in the car on the tracks and then imagine that he's back in his room, and somehow it all works. He ends up joining the 10 best racers to see who's the best sim driver, and after a couple of training montages, Jan ends up crashing during a lap with the safety instructor inside the car. Now, Jans calls it out by saying that his brakes were glazed, and that becomes like this really big moment for David Harbour's character, because that's when he realizes that, his simulator is actually as good as it claims to be, because the results prove he's right. While he ends up being the best driver in the academy and does take first place by like a headlight, Orlando's kind of worried because Jans isn't really the best when it comes to PR, and he's always crashing and burning when it comes to interviews.
Before GT Academy, yes, I was quite a timid, sort of introvert kind of person.
The movie even does this weird edit where, like, Orlando really wants this other guy to be it, and he's, like, super serious about it. And then Harbour's like, no, and Orlando's like, okay, fine. From there, we see Jans go up the ranks and become an official driver, going through a bunch of ups and downs, and it all works because of the way they shoot this movie. Pretty much, they stacked a bunch of IMAX quality cameras inside and around the car to actually get the shots of what it's like to go that fast on the road. It's a lot like what Top Gun Maverick did to capture all the G-forces on the actors. On top of that, the main guy stunt driver was the main guy, so every time the actor would come in, the real-life Jans would just switch out with him and then skirt out of the pit crew at full speed.
And then we did it 11 times after that.
Wait, that spin out, you did?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I was gassed.
I didn't know, because I did a version of the spin out when I'm inside the car.
That was an unusual feeling to go backwards at 90 miles an hour.
Meanwhile, Archie the actor did the complete opposite of going from a gamer to a racer.
It's, kind of dream come true situation, being paid to play PlayStation.
Now, when you look at the stats for this dude, it's really impressive. Sure, as accurate as GT can be, there's always going to be a big difference between going from your room in a Rocker Pro to sitting in a metal box that's shooting your body at 160 an hour. And this guy was so quick in real life that he actually got banned for being too fast on the track. So having the movie try to recreate that speed is kind of crazy, because I learned that Archie was so tall, this dude didn't even fit in his car.
In order for him to fit in the car without the helmet.
Oh, wow.
The helmet was touching at some points. When a driver sits in the car, we have a seat. A nice kind of foam padded seat. Archie's very tall. Archie couldn't use one of those seats, so he sat on bare carbon, going at that speed, being strapped in, so he's feeling everything. So you know what a race car is like, it's millimeters from the ground. He's feeling everything through a carbon chassis, no compression or anything. And he's acting as well.
Yeah, I know this guy from Midsommar, and somehow this sounds more terrifying.
I was in the car. Every scene that you see me in the car, I am in the car, racing at full speed. I'm vomiting. It was boiling hot. It was truly the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life.
After going up the ranks, we end up at the crossroads of the movie, where Jan ends up in a freak accident. And in terms of the movie, the way that they show it, especially with the sound effects, it's pretty insane. They have his parents watching at home, realizing they can't do anything about it because it's too far away, and they made it feel so visceral. I legit thought this man died halfway through the movie and I was watching a tribute film. So it was a little off to read after the movie that they changed some things around for the real life story. It turns out that while this did happen, it was an accident that happened earlier in his career, but the movie shifts it to later so that it can be like a thing he overcomes in the plot. But someone in the audience who was watching the race did die during that, and the brakes weren't gloss. So it is a little manipulative to switch a real life event when someone did lose their life.
People were telling us that we were crazy and that it couldn't be done, or that we would hurt someone, or even worse.
Harbour's character eventually helps him through his recovery and even brings up his own accident when he was a racer, which caused him to quit. And this man legit convinces Jan to continue by saying, "Hey kid, don't end up like me." Pretty much the idea is that tragedies and mistakes don't define you. It's all about what you do after. Plus, they also bond by letting you know that Sony still makes Walkmans for music. The movie then builds up to the biggest race and climax for the Academy, which is getting a video game player to actually compete at Le Mans. A place so legendary, it's the climax for some of the best racing movies like Rush and Ford v Ferrari. This is a place where the race rallies for 24 hours, but right before it, they give you one of the best moments between him and his dad where they finally bond. He shows his dad the soccer sticker that he's been keeping on his helmet in order to represent him, and acknowledges his father's past even though he went down a different path. And man, I felt the audience rev up their tear ducts. It's also cool to note that that's actually the first race we see him playing at the beginning of the movie.
You've raced it, 1,000 times?
Now you just gotta do it in real life.
To me, Neill Blomkamp delivers on this final act. And I think he does a good job because of the way that he's mixing all of the elements, and I'll even give him a pass for all of the goofy gamer quotes that he sneaks in there.
Noob! Are you mad, bro? Tell me what you're mad for.
One of the main ways that he was able to capture a lot of it and all those crazy angles was by using these high-speed drones, and it looked raw. Like, they even claimed that they were looking to break the record for the fastest high-speed photography of an actor, and I'm pretty sure they got it. Like, I didn't realize that this man had learned a lot of his practicals and techniques studying under Peter Jackson and Weta, so him teaming up with Orlando probably gave them a lot to talk about. But it's also interesting to see him go from all the gritty sci-fi movies that he's been making for so long to something that, I'll just call more hopeful.
The theme of that movie it's definitely not about AI. It's about the corruption it's about the soul being corrupted by an imperfect reality. That the world corrupts everything. And so the purity of the soul in that film, which is this little robot, gets just decimated by...
I'm beginning to get this sense you're not an optimist. Am I right, or...?
In the end, Jan ends up platforming at Le Mans, proving all of his haters wrong, winning a medal, and scoring the rights to a future movie that will eventually be all about him. Now we wait for EA to adapt every other sport.
EA Sports. It's in the game.